Claire Geller loved the stillness of early mornings in New England. As soft sunlight streamed through the tall windows of her Chicago apartment, she poured herself a fresh cup of coffee while flipping through the latest issue of Biochemical Advances, spread out neatly on the kitchen counter. Her green eyes gleamed with intellectual curiosity, and her neatly styled chestnut bob framed a face that bore the calm assurance of a woman who'd found her rhythm. "Mom, I can't figure this one out," came the slightly frustrated voice of her daughter from the living room table. "Which city are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And hey, make sure you watch till the end. Something's going to happen that you won't see coming." Claire smiled and moved over, coffee in hand. 8-year-old Lily had her father's thick brown hair and her mother's sharp green eyes. Watching her work so diligently on math homework never failed to warm Claire's heart. "Let's take a look," Claire said, peering over Lily's shoulder. Though she dealt daily with complex chemical equations as a pharmaceutical researcher, helping her daughter grasp elementary fractions often felt more challenging than any lab puzzle. "Oh, I get it now." Lily suddenly grinned and started scribbling with her pencil. "So this is how you do it." Claire nodded, gently ruffling her daughter's hair. "Exactly. Nicely done." 3 years ago, Claire had divorced her husband, Daniel, who had been stationed in Afghanistan as a military doctor. The distance eventually wore down their marriage, but they'd remained amicable for Lily's sake. Daniel stayed true to his word. He called Lily every month and visited twice a year during his leave. Their cozy apartment in a quiet Chicago suburb wasn't luxurious, but it was filled with order and light degrees in biochemistry framed on the walls, alongside photos of Lily's beaming smile. "Grandma and Aunt Julia are coming today, right?" Lily asked, her voice tinged with something hesitant. Claire caught the subtle shift in her tone and glanced at her. "Yes, they are. And your cousin Mason too. We're all having lunch together." Lily nodded but said nothing, returning to her homework. Claire felt a little pang in her chest. There was something distant in Lily's reaction, but she tried to brush it off. Family relationships were never easy, and on the surface, they all got along. Claire's mother, Evelyn, was a well-known presence in Chicago's local social circles. After her husband passed away, she'd smartly invested the insurance money and lived comfortably in a large old mansion in the suburbs. She kept active with charity events and church groups. "Claire's always buried in her work," Evelyn would remark to her neighbors. "Too clever for her own good, that one." Her praise always came with a whisper of envy. She had once dreamed of being a chemist herself, but abandoned it to marry young. Watching her daughter succeed in the field she had left behind stirred feelings Evelyn never fully admitted. Claire's younger sister, Julia, had been through a rough divorce and was raising her 10-year-old son, Mason, while juggling her job at a local real estate office. She dressed boldly and always had a touch of drama in her voice. But behind the cheerful exterior was someone simmering with bitterness and jealousy. "My sister's the perfect one," Julia would say with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Can't compete with that." Mason, thankfully, was nothing like his mother. He was a quiet, thoughtful boy and got along well with Lily. "Lily, time to go," Claire called, checking her watch. Lily nodded and packed up her homework. She took Claire's hand and asked softly, "Are we coming home early?" "Of course," Claire replied gently. "We'll head home right after lunch. And remember, I'm flying out tomorrow for my business trip, so let's make the most of today." Claire gave her daughter's hand a small squeeze. She was leaving for a week-long conference in Switzerland, a major event in the drug development world. During her absence, Lily would be staying with her mother and sister. Despite outward appearances, Claire couldn't shake the unease that always crept in when she left Lily with them. She had noticed the occasional coldness in Evelyn and Julia's treatment of Lily, but she chalked it up to envy or stress, not something to be seriously alarmed about. "They're still family," Claire reassured herself. She had to believe that blood meant something. At the boarding gate for Zurich, she called her mother one last time. "I've put Lily's dinners in the bottom shelf of the fridge, they just need reheating. Don't forget her medication. And you remember she's allergic to—" Yes, Claire," Evelyn interrupted with an edge. "How many times are you going to repeat yourself? I raised you, remember?" Claire sighed, her anxiety still lingering. "I know. I'm sorry. I'm just worried." "Go to your fancy conference," Evelyn replied, with a tired sigh. "Leave Lily to us." But even after the call ended, the knot in Claire's chest wouldn't loosen. She couldn't forget Lily's face the night before, quieter than usual, repeatedly asking, Do you have to go? Lily had stayed with her grandmother before, many times, but this time, something felt different. Final boarding call for Flight 324 to Zurich, the intercom echoed. With heavy steps, Claire made her way to the gate. The conference was a whirlwind: late nights, intense debates, brilliant insights from top researchers. Claire absorbed it all like a sponge, eager to apply what she learned to her own groundbreaking research. By the third night, she finally collapsed onto her hotel bed, bone-tired. It was a.m. in Zurich, still evening back home. She checked her phone, no messages. Odd. Usually, her mom would have sent photos by now. They must be busy, she muttered, stepping into the shower. But even in her exhaustion, she couldn't sleep. The glowing lights of Zurich outside her window felt cold. An hour later, just as she drifted into a shallow sleep, the phone rang. Miss Geller? This is Johnson from Chicago General Hospital. The man's voice was calm, but Claire instantly sensed the urgency. Yes, this is Claire Geller. Your daughter, Lily Geller, has been admitted to the ER. She's in critical condition. Claire's body turned to ice. Words like fall from a height, head trauma, unconscious, and preparing for surgery blurred together like static. What do you mean? Claire stammered. Lily's supposed to be with my mother and sister. An ambulance responded to a 911 call from your family. Please come as soon as possible. Claire dropped the phone and frantically dialed Evelyn. Her fingers were shaking so badly she misdialed twice. Hello, her mother answered, groggy. Mom, what happened to Lily? I just got a call from the hospital. A long silence. Then, unbelievably, a short, tired laugh. I don't know. Maybe she wandered off on her own. That child never listens lately. What? Claire's voice cracked. She's in critical condition at Chicago General. Oh, that's awful, Evelyn said flatly. I'll ask Julia. The call shifted, and Julia came on. What is it, Claire? It's late. Julia, what happened to Lily? I just got a call that she was rushed to the hospital. That kid. Julia's voice was tinged with annoyance. She wouldn't listen. I turned around for a second and poof, gone. Her fault, honestly. Claire felt the blood drain from her face. Their indifference was beyond comprehension. I'm getting on the next flight. You better go to the hospital right now, she said, barely controlling her rage. Ugh, fine. Don't make such a scene, Julia replied with a huff. Claire ended the call and immediately phoned the front desk to arrange the earliest possible flight home. Her hands trembled as she threw clothes into her suitcase. Her mind raced, haunted by questions she couldn't answer. What had Lily been doing? What kind of accident had this been? And why had her mother and sister responded with such apathy? Please, Lily, she whispered through tears. Please be okay. 12 hours later, Claire stood outside the intensive care unit at Chicago General Hospital. Her face was pale, her eyes bloodshot from sleepless flights and anguish. She clung to every word of the doctor standing before her. Miss Geller, your daughter appears to have fallen from the roof of a two-story house, he said gently. She sustained a severe concussion, fractures in her left arm and 3 ribs, as well as some internal injuries. While her condition is stable, she hasn't regained consciousness yet. It will take time. Claire felt the floor shift beneath her feet as the doctor led her to Lily's room. When she stepped inside, her knees nearly buckled. Her daughter lay in the sterile white bed, her tiny frame obscured by bandages and wires. Her left arm was in a sling, and machines beeped rhythmically beside her, marking time in the silent room. Claire slowly approached and sat beside Lily, taking her unbandaged hand in hers. It was cold to the touch. She gently pressed her lips to it and whispered, Mommy's here now. I'm going to keep you safe. The door opened again. Claire turned, expecting to see a nurse, but in walked Evelyn and Julia. Claire stared at them, unable to hide the shock. Evelyn was dressed immaculately, like she'd just come from brunch. Julia's flashy outfit was equally out of place. Neither wore an expression of concern or remorse. Oh, you actually came, Evelyn said breezily. No need to get so worked up. Claire rose to her feet, her hands clenched into fists. Something was deeply wrong, not just with the accident, but with them. What happened? She asked, her voice low and trembling. Tell me exactly what happened. The 2 women exchanged quick, guarded glances. She climbed up there on her own, Julia said with a shrug. We didn't even notice until she fell. Claire stared in disbelief. Lily was not the kind of child who'd climb on a roof. She was careful, always mindful, especially about heights. And this explanation, it felt like a rehearsed lie. I want both of you to leave this room, Claire said coldly. Come back when you're ready to tell me the truth. Their expressions twisted into annoyance, but neither resisted. They turned and left, muttering under their breath. Claire sat back down and took Lily's hand again. Her anger had settled into something stronger now. Resolve. She would get to the bottom of this. For Lily, for herself. In the hospital's waiting lounge, Claire sat with a hot cup of coffee, barely touching it. The bags under her eyes were darker now, her skin pale from 3 nights of worry. She hadn't left Lily's side except when absolutely necessary. Claire. She looked up and saw Daniel striding in through the hospital doors. He was still in his military uniform, a large duffel slung over his shoulder. His usually calm demeanor was etched with fatigue and concern, but his blue eyes locked onto Claire's with familiar reassurance. Daniel, she whispered. He embraced her tightly, and for a moment, she let herself feel held. I got on the earliest flight I could, he said. How is she? She still hasn't woken up, Claire replied, her voice breaking. The doctors say she's stable, but there's no telling when she'll awake. And Mom and Julia, they're acting like they don't care at all. Daniel's face tightened with fury. That doesn't sound like Lily at all. Climbing on a roof? That's not her. Something's off. I know, Claire nodded. There's something they're hiding. Daniel's jaw tensed. We should talk to the police. It's already been filed as an accident, Claire replied, then hesitated. Her voice dropped. But there's more. When I went into the guest room Lily had stayed in, there were iron burns on her clothes. Who asks an 8-year-old to do ironing? Daniel's eyes narrowed. I've got a friend in the Chicago PD. I'll make a call. Later that day, they returned to Lily's room together. Daniel leaned over her bed and kissed her forehead. I'm here now, sweetheart, he whispered. I'm not going anywhere. The next day brought the first break in the case. Claire was eating a quick lunch in the hospital cafeteria when Daniel approached with a man in plain clothes. Claire, this is Detective Mark Dalton. He needs to speak with you. The detective was calm, composed, with a deep empathy in his gaze. He sat across from Claire and folded his hands on the table. Miss Geller, we received a call from the parent of one of Lily's classmates, a boy named Mason Parker. Your nephew. Claire's eyes widened. Mason? What did he say? We're still sorting through the details, but according to the school counselor, Mason told her a version of the story that contradicts what your mother and sister told us. Claire's stomach turned. She gripped her coffee cup tightly. Can I talk to him? We're arranging that now, Detective Dalton said. A lawyer and a representative from Child Protective Services will be present as well. Daniel placed his hand on Claire's shoulder. Whatever the truth is, we'll deal with it together. 2 hours later, in a small conference room in the hospital, Claire and Daniel sat across from Mason. The 10-year-old looked even smaller than usual, his eyes red and puffy. A social worker sat beside him, as did a court-appointed attorney. Claire leaned forward, her voice soft and steady. Mason, sweetheart, it's okay. You don't have to be scared. Just tell us what really happened. The boy trembled. Mom and Grandma, they were always mean to Lily. When she wasn't around, they'd say stuff like, that girl's too full of herself. Claire swallowed her rising anger. What happened the day Lily got hurt? Mason looked down, his voice barely audible. Mom told Lily to clean the roof. There were leaves in the gutter. I said I'd do it, but she said, let her do it. Maybe a little scare will teach her to listen. A stunned silence filled the room. Lily was scared, but she started climbing the ladder. Mom and Grandma were inside. I went out to be with her. She slipped. I tried to catch her, I really did, but I wasn't fast enough. He broke into sobs. It's not my fault, I tried to help. The social worker pulled him into a gentle hug. It's not your fault, Mason. Claire felt like the air had been punched out of her lungs. Detective Dalton leaned forward. What happened after the fall? Mason sniffled. She didn't move. I screamed. Mom and Grandma came running. Mom cried at first, but then Grandma said, it's okay. We'll just say she climbed up there by herself. Claire turned toward the window, her body trembling with a mixture of fury and grief. They didn't call an ambulance right away, Mason added. Grandma said, let's wait and see. But Lily was bleeding. I begged them over and over. Detective Dalton nodded slowly. That's enough, Mason. You did the right thing. When Mason left the room, Claire stood frozen in place, her thoughts spinning. We have sufficient grounds to move forward, Dalton said. Your mother and sister will be arrested for child endangerment and failure to provide aid. That evening, Claire was speaking with a nurse outside the ICU when she saw two police officers escorting Evelyn and Julia down the hallway in handcuffs. Julia was crying hysterically. Evelyn looked stunned. "This is a mistake," Evelyn shouted. "We didn't do anything." "Claire, tell them, please," Julia sobbed. "Mason's lying. He doesn't understand." Claire stepped forward, her voice cold and unwavering. "Lily woke up," she said. They froze. Claire was lying. Lily was still unconscious, but the horror on Evelyn's and Julia's faces said it all. Guilt was written in every twitch of their expressions. "You left my daughter broken and bleeding," Claire said. "And you waited. I'll never forgive you." After the officers led Evelyn and Julia away, Daniel quietly stepped beside Claire, his face solemn. The detective said, "There's enough evidence to show this wasn't just one bad moment," he murmured. "It's looking more and more like ongoing abuse." Claire's knees felt weak again, but she steadied herself. "Lily never said anything. She must have been too scared, or trying to protect me." Daniel gently wrapped his arm around her. "She doesn't have to protect anyone anymore. We're here now, and we're not going anywhere." Claire nodded. "Things are going to be different, I promise." Just then, a nurse hurried over, slightly out of breath. "Miss Geller," she said, eyes wide. "Your daughter is awake." Claire and Daniel rushed through the hallway like a gust of wind. When they burst into Lily's hospital room, Claire's heart leapt into her throat. Lily's eyes were open, hazy, slow blinking, but unmistakably alive. "Sweetheart," Claire choked, dropping to her knees beside the bed. "It's Mommy. You're safe now." Lily's fingers twitched and curled around hers. Her lips moved slightly, whispering, "Mom." Daniel stepped to the other side of the bed and brushed her hair gently back from her face. "Daddy's here too," he whispered. "We're both here, Lily." Claire pressed her forehead to her daughter's hand. Relief surged through her body in waves so powerful it nearly knocked her over. For the first time since that terrible call, she felt air in her lungs again. 3 weeks later, the courtroom of the Massachusetts Supreme Court was packed. The high ceilings and somber atmosphere gave the room a heavy, formal weight. Claire sat in the front row, her back straight, her face emotionless as she stared at the backs of the two defendants, Evelyn and Julia Geller, her mother and sister. Once, people she trusted with her daughter's life, now strangers. Evelyn looked older, her once silver blonde hair now stark white, styled tightly in a bun. Julia sat beside her, her usual flair and flash dulled. She looked exhausted, stripped of her usual fire. Daniel was seated next to Claire in a dark suit, his military uniform replaced with something just as formal, just as composed. He squeezed her hand. "I'm right here." He had filed for a transfer to a Chicago area base after Lily's accident. Whatever the future held, he was going to be closer to their daughter now. Lily wasn't in court. She was still healing physically and emotionally. It had been just over 2 months since the fall, and though her bones were mending, she had nightmares, sometimes flinched when touched too quickly. She was seeing a therapist once a week. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the voice came from the front of the courtroom. Martha Reed, the prosecutor. She was a stern, no-nonsense woman in her 40s, known for her unrelenting work in child abuse cases. "This case," she began, "is not simply about an accident. It is about deliberate endangerment, prolonged neglect, and a cover-up orchestrated by the very people who should have protected the child." The jury leaned forward, and the room fell into deep, tense silence. The prosecutor displayed photos on a screen. The sharp pitch of the roof, the outdated, worn clothing found in Lily's overnight bag, the burns on her shirts from iron presses, the photos of Lily's bruises, bandages, her fragile body in the ICU. Claire closed her eyes and steadied her breathing. The images never got easier. And then the prosecutor continued. There was the testimony from a 10-year-old boy, Mason Parker. The courtroom shifted. Martha's voice softened slightly. Despite fear, despite loyalty to his family, he told the truth. Julia's attorney hung his head low. Evelyn's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Every effort they'd made to portray the incident as a misunderstanding, a misjudgment, had crumbled under the weight of Mason's confession. The prosecutor paused before continuing. The defendants did not simply fail to protect a child. They manipulated the truth. They delayed emergency care. They endangered her life and then chose to lie. The jurors' faces were stone cold. Several elderly women glanced at Evelyn with looks of withering disdain. Claire sat like a statue. Every word only deepened the sense of finality. The love she'd once held for her family was now buried under this avalanche of betrayal. The next morning, judgment was passed. The judge, a tall, gray-haired man with a voice like gravel, stood and read the verdict to the hushed courtroom. Evelyn Geller and Julia Geller. You have both been found guilty of child abuse and failure to provide aid to a minor. Claire's heart pounded. Evelyn Geller, the judge said, turning to her mother. You are sentenced to a fine of $100,000 and a 2-year suspended sentence. Additionally, you are ordered to pay $200,000 in damages to the victim. Lily Geller. Evelyn's face went pale. That money would wipe out the life savings she'd once flaunted. Julia Geller, the judge continued. You are sentenced to 3 years of probation. Furthermore, as determined by the juvenile court, your parental rights over your son, Mason Parker, will be restricted. You are granted supervised visitation only once a week for the next year. Julia broke down sobbing at the defendant's table. It was clear that the loss of Mason more than her reputation or freedom was the punishment that struck deepest. Lastly, the judge said, both defendants are prohibited from unsupervised contact with minors for the next 10 years. This includes all interaction with Lily Geller. When the gavel fell, it was like the closing of a massive steel door. Outside the courtroom, Claire and Daniel walked in silence through the buzzing media crowd. Miss Geller, any comment? A reporter called out. Claire paused, then spoke quietly. We're focused on Lily's healing right now. That's all. Chicago media followed the trial intensely. Evelyn, once a respected figure in the social and charity scene, became the subject of scandal. She was forced to resign from every board she served on. Her church community excommunicated her. Julia lost her job at the real estate firm within days of the verdict. Her finances crumbled. She moved into a small, run-down apartment. She was allowed to see Mason once a week under the supervision of a court officer. Their relationship, once tight, dissolved into bitterness and blame. Back at the hospital, Claire sat in the cafeteria beside Daniel, who had his laptop open. Becky tried to reach out again, he said, glancing at his screen. She says she's struggling to pay rent. Your mom too, she says she can't afford a nurse in the retirement home. Claire stirred her coffee without looking up. I know, and I haven't replied, she said quietly. Not until Lily says she's ready to forgive them. Daniel nodded. Good, that's a decision she deserves to make. They both turned at the sound of footsteps. Lily was wheeling down the hall, smiling weakly. Next to her was Daniel's father, Judge William Warner, a composed man in his 70s, whose wisdom and calm had been a quiet anchor these past weeks. She's asking about school again, William said warmly. Says she's ready to go back soon, Claire said gently, kneeling beside her daughter's chair. We'll talk to the doctor. But first, we need to see our new house. Lily's eyes lit up. Near Dad's base. Claire nodded, smiling. A new beginning. Just for us. Daniel knelt beside them, hugging them both. 1 year later, the trees in suburban Chicago had begun to shift into warm hues: gold, crimson, rustling softly in the cool fall breeze. In the backyard of a cozy white two-story house, Lily played basketball with a few neighborhood kids, her laughter ringing out across the lawn. Her recovery had been nothing short of remarkable. Now a confident, bright-eyed 10-year-old, she moved with energy and purpose stronger than ever. Nice shot, Lil. Daniel called from the porch, where he sipped coffee while watching his daughter dribble. After his transfer to a nearby military base, he was now able to be part of her everyday life, not just during leave. He cherished every moment. Inside, Claire smiled from the kitchen window, mug in hand. She had negotiated a hybrid work arrangement with her pharmaceutical company, 3 days a week from home, 2 on site. It allowed her the one thing she had once lacked: balance. Dad, Lily called from the yard. Can I invite Mason next time? Of course, Daniel said, ruffling her hair as she ran past. I'm sure he'd love that. Mason was living in a foster home now, still under Child Protective Services oversight. Claire and Daniel paid for his therapy and visited twice a month. He was slowly healing, and his bond with Lily, once fractured, was beginning to rebuild. There's a letter, Claire said as Daniel returned inside. She handed him a cream-colored envelope. The handwriting was unmistakable. It's from Mom, she said quietly. Daniel frowned. What does she want? She says she's broke, asking for help paying for the nursing home. Claire's voice was flat. Becky's in a run-down apartment and barely scraping by. She can only see Mason under supervision. Daniel sighed. What are you going to do? Claire stared out the window, her eyes following Lily's movements. Nothing. Not until Lily says she's ready. Not until she wants to forgive them. Daniel nodded, his respect evident in the silence that followed. That's fair. The two of them sat by the fireplace that evening, warmth crackling between them and the scent of wood smoke filling the room. Outside, laughter continued from the backyard, children's voices bright, unharmed. Claire took a sip of her drink, holding it with both hands. Sometimes, she murmured, I still think, if I hadn't gone on that trip. Stop, Daniel said gently, squeezing her hand. You're a good mom. There's no such thing as perfect. What matters is what you did when it counted. Claire looked down at their intertwined fingers and gave a small, tired smile. Thanks. Outside, Lily made a perfect jump shot, and her friends cheered. Claire watched her, a gentle strength returning to her chest. A new beginning, she whispered. She had learned so much this past year. About strength, about betrayal, and about what it truly means to protect a child. Blood didn't make a family. Love did. And love sometimes meant standing firm, saying no, and walking away from those who had once held your trust. But above all, she had learned this: the truth always rises. The wind rustled the trees gently, carrying laughter through the windows. Claire and Daniel smiled at each other. There was still a long road ahead, but this moment, this peace was enough.